McLean Show on Monday, 12th of May. And today we are going to talk about society's false promises versus, let me see how I called it because I forgot how I called it, versus authentic living. And this is a very, very dear topic and it's very close to my heart because last week we were talking about, I forgot what the show was called last week, but we were talking about a topic around, let me see, because around a ship is not safer in the harbor. It is not. It is the most safe out at sea. And we're talking about what that takes. And we ended in the middle of a conversation. But in case you're following us week by week, I just want to tell you that last week, life has been throwing me curveball after curveball because I'm pretty sure last week I started the show talking about the power blackout in Spain where I was in the middle of and how to just be present in all of it. And then when I got home on Sunday or something like that, my mom had been she fell and she broke her hip. Now, that is not nice. It's not a nice thing to do when you're almost 80. She had a complete hip replacement. The operation went beautifully. There was surgery. It's all good. Now she's just in restoration and learning to walk again. Kind of okay when you're 80. Except my sister was here and now I am here in my old bedroom. And my older sister is coming tonight and my son is here. Turns out that we have been masking a lot of problems that had already been going on for quite some time and they're becoming worse and they're becoming more visible, and the frailty of how we deal with society has never been more clear to me than this week. So I forgot where we stopped last week because all of this week I've been in the middle of this. I've been in the middle of my son being in a car and not being able to be helped by the people who should help him in Spain. That's a whole different story. My parents being in this very fragile situation. My sisters and I, who are really close now, in this moment, all the emotions of my childhood and the emotions of now and of possibly saying goodbye to my parents, even though they're not dying, but there's we are so fragile. The fragility of life has never been more clear to me. And when we look at last week, I said we're going to talk about society's false promises versus authentic living. I'm in the middle of it. Because what I see as society's false promises is that at a certain point we've learned enough and we know how to do it and we know how to deal with all of it. And then everything will be in place. We'll have our bank account, we'll have our job, we'll have our family, we'll have loved ones, and then we can be authentic. Whereas the authentic truth of life is that we are who we are and we can't always change that. We can't always fight our way through, and we are extremely fragile as human beings. We need each other. One thing I want to share before we start this conversation is that over the past 4 days, the first thing I did when I came here in my parents' home was look at the situation and think, holy fuck, this is a big trauma here. Not just the fall and the breaking of the hip, but also the realization of a form of dementia that my dad has. He doesn't have Alzheimer's, but he has a form of completely not knowing where he is in a certain moment, not understanding what he's doing, stuff like that. And that is becoming really big. My mom isn't able to deal with it. The first thought I had was, this is trauma. We need a bigger container to carry this. So the first thing I did was look at how can we expand the container that can carry it? Because, hey, I have a family. I live an hour from here. Kind of okay, but I can't go up and down every day. I have kids who need me. My kids have their life that they're building, as do my sisters. So we can't be here 24 hours a day. How can we expand the container? So the first thing I did was take my dad out on walks across the neighborhood sitting him down with each and every neighbor that they have, and they live about, what is it, 500 meters in between all of their neighbors. So those were quite extensive walks, quite long coffee talks, where I explained the entire situation openly to all the neighbors. Where I thought initially I might be kind of throwing a burden on their plate or something, right? I said we might need some help, even if it's just a coffee talk every week for my dad, or just somebody to keep an extra eye out. And the biggest thing that I realized in every conversation I had, which is probably over 40 now by now, is how big the container is, how deeply these people are loved, how the neighbors already knew things were going to go this way, how they were already looking out for them, how they were even signaling amongst each other, we need to keep an eye on those people. If we look at society's false promises, it's all around you need to be able to do it alone, I need to be able to figure everything out alone. Whereas authentic living is probably more true to surrendering into that we can't do it all alone, that we don't need to do it all alone. I had a group of students in my room last week. I had a group of students on Zoom on Sunday with Suze. And all of these students are sending me messages saying, can we help you? These are clients. They're paying us for their programs, of course. And they're here for us. They are part of our container. And I think authentic living has to do with not our bank account being our container, but our container that is able to carry us authentically is not the false promise of us working and struggling our way through it, but accepting that actually the world can carry us exactly the way we are. There's nothing we need to do, nothing we need to understand. We are being held in so many ways that I have never been able to see so far. So, Yako, how are you doing? This is our first talk in 4 days, I think.
Yeah, what you are talking about is a very different society as the society you're going to know if you're just looking at the papers and the television and all kind of um, all kind of yeah that you can follow. It's all about how to be independent on others and also try to be independent on the authorities because it seems that a lot of policies on a national or local scale things are going to be different. There's less. It looks like there's less. Um, yeah, support and there's less care for people like your
Yeah.
parents. So if so in Holland, people should stay at their own place as long as possible. Where
Yes.
in the past it was normal that people should go to homes for elderly people where there was a kind of a care for them.
Yeah, well,
Nowadays,
but there's something interesting because if I look at my parents, so my sisters and I have been looking at how long is this sustainable, right? Of course, the first question is, can they still live here? But one of the things that's occurring to us deeper and deeper is, well, they can't live anywhere else either because they're not flexible enough. My mom has deep childhood trauma, and the only thing she's rooted in are her routines. And it's she's never been diagnosed with autism, and it doesn't matter if there is a diagnosis or not, but her way of living has been pretty what I would call autistic in a sense of routine, knowing where I am, knowing what is here, knowing who my people are. And if we look at, so we've been looking at daycare for my dad, and we were thinking, but the kind of daycare here, is that really the thing that he would thrive on? But he is so connected in the little community here. If we take him out of his home, he doesn't know where he is in his home. But if we now take him into a place where he is not familiar at all, he's going to drown.
Mhm. Yeah, what I was to say is that so there's it looks like there are two kind of societies. The society you
Yeah.
can know from the outside when you look through the eyes of the media or television or just general talk between people about how society is. But now the image you painted here is that there's another kind of society where there is
Yes.
care, where there is people looking for each other and helping each other out.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
also about opinions people have. They can have very strong opinions about all kind of people or groups in society, but as it comes to their own surroundings and their own social group, they can be very loving and
Yeah.
warm and caring
Yeah.
at the same time. So
Yeah.
they're
And it's,
different faces.
yes. And what you're presenting now is actually, yeah. So maybe the false promises of society is the false image of the newspapers and of social media. Because that false promise is like, if you push yourself hard enough, then you'll have support. And if you have the right diplomas, then you'll be able to support yourself. And if you work hard enough, then the rewards will come. But also the false promise of that you will be able to buy this kind of love and care, and that money will get you anywhere. Because what I'm realizing now is, yeah, of course we need food to pay for the groceries in the supermarket. That's all true. But our real needs are not in that at all. What I'm realizing is that the false promise that we will be taken care of by money is a real false promise. And if we authentically show up, which my parents have always done, we create networks of connection that will carry us through anything. And that will actually be so much more sustainable. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the false promise is that we need to shut ourselves down, and that by shutting down we will be rewarded. I actually think, and that authenticity is that reward. Whereas if we allow ourselves to show up from a place of knowing that we're all the same in this need for connection, in this need for love, in this need to be seen in our problems to a level that we can't see ourselves. I just when we connected to start this show, you said something profound. I said, I'm beginning to see a certain side of my mom that in 50 years I've never really been wanting to see to its full extent. And I told you that I think I've been masking many of the things that were going on in my family. And you said you weren't masking them. And that's interesting, right? So people around us can often see ourselves so deep, so much deeper than we
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then, in order to live authentically, we need to allow it.
It comes close to something I heard a few days ago, which was also very interesting. I already knew it, but I wasn't not uh, I wasn't aware that much then a few days ago when I heard it, that uh, we as people we really wish for our surroundings, especially when we're a young child. That but even as a grown up, that people we know that they understand us even when we don't speak up what we wish for, our longings or
Yeah,
desires or wishes or needs, and um, and we want those people to see us for who we really are.
yeah,
But do we see ourselves as we really are? And now you say probably they see better who you are than you yourself, and that's
yes,
already very
yes,
funny. But then even we really wish they can see us who we are, and we forgot we don't even know ourselves that well. So we are so restricted. No, not restricted. We are so entangled with our bodyguards or ego or personality. We are
yeah,
identified with so much thoughts and behaviors that is not our true self,
yeah,
and still
yeah,
other people might see more of who we are than we do ourselves.
yes. Yeah, and then there's this tendency of fixing all of that, right? Fixing our past, fixing how we see ourselves. And this brings me back to my boyfriend when I was 21. He got hit by a car and his entire brain was damaged and he lost all of his memory until I think the age of 5 or something. All of it was erased and he didn't have a clue who he was anymore. And one of the things I can still remember deeply in the 2.5 years that I took care of him was that at a certain point we went to a bar and he said, "But what do people do here?" And I said, "Well, they just sit and talk and drink beer." Because that's what you do when you're 21, right? And that's what people do in bars. And he said, "Okay, but what do you talk about then and why?" And that is the time where I realized that all of that is things that we've learned. This is not something we're born with understanding. We have learned throughout our entire childhood how to do social engagement and social connections. And he lost all of that. And then he lost a lot of his nervous system wiring and he lost a lot of his brain filters that could allow him to understand what to do. And then the idea and the false idea is, well, if you just understand what to do, it will come back. But it's not that simple because in order to understand who we truly are, we can't look at what our brain filters understand us to be by all of our experiences. We're more than our experiences. We're more than I read a post this morning on LinkedIn saying we're more than our labels. Yeah, we're more than our labels, but we're also more than the things we did, and we're more than the people we know, and we're more than all of our experiences, and we're more than the 50 years and all the events. We are the thing that is evolving from all of that. We are this, that's what I call, we are revealing God, right? We're born here with something that is coming through us, but we can only look at it from a lens of the effect that we're having on other people and the effect that our lives are having on this planet. And that's what's touching me so deeply. If I talk to all these neighbors here and all these people, they're sharing glimpses of the effect that my parents are having on the world. And that is their authentic self. Because if I would have to describe my father, it would be somebody who sails and who loves computers and who is highly intelligent and who does certain specific things. And we can describe all of that, but that still could be about all kinds of people. But who he really is somebody who just opens your heart and who is so charismatic and such a deep, genuinely interested, warm, loving person, and who can touch people in such a profound way. Um, by talking to these people, I see them, I was going to say, I see them connect with where my father triggers them, and then we are with that energy together. That's authentic.
I
That's
have a
who we
question
are.
about it
Yes.
um, because you could say authenticity is what you show while you're with other people. So what you contribute to the relationship. Um, but is it always the real self, the true self, or is it? Or can it also be all your adaptations, all your coping mechanisms? Because that's also what you show in those communication and interaction.
I think it's all of it. It's a beautiful question because I speak with so many people who say, I just want to speak and live authentically. Yeah, but your masks are also authentic. It's also who you are. I spoke
But
with somebody
you
about
could say because you're still need those masks, or you did not discover your masks and put them off yet. So as soon as those layers are off, then you become different or more your true self.
I'm not so sure. I think your true self is shining through all of it. Thing is, does it feel free? And that's the big question, right? I was talking this morning with somebody who said, I just want to be free to choose. I want to be free to show up the way I want to show up. I want to be free to choose um, how I engage in an audience. In this case, that was his question. Um, but I want to be free to engage, free to choose, free to move, free to act, and then I am authentically me. I think all of it is authentic. I think the big problem is that choice means, can you consciously live in all your masks, and you consciously choose a specific mask, or are you almost forced? That's not the right word, but is the mask taking you, or are you putting it on? That's
Mm.
the difference, right? So can we voluntarily choose? I was talking about this with a lot of the digital nomads that I met over the past months, I would say. They say, yeah, I live a life of choice. But, and this is hard to hear for a lot of people, that's not completely true, because when I ask them, well, could you choose to have a home base where you wouldn't be moving all around the world? They say, no, 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 no. I chose a nomad life. And I said, well, it's only a choice if you can also comfortably choose to not live like a nomad. And they said, no, that scares the freaking daylights out of me.
I,
And
I, I,
then it becomes a mask, and we can have preferences. That's all good. But it's the same in interaction. I think our true self is able of a level of choice that our masks don't allow us. But,
If you talk about choice and freedom, and the choice to how you present yourself, I would say I can really recognize it as it comes about shame. For example,
yeah,
in the past, I was really withdrawn in life. Withdraw, yeah, is that the word?
yeah, yeah,
Withdrawn in life because of shame. I didn't. I I couldn't come up for who I was and not really present myself
yeah.
as who I was. But so that's a very nice thing to discover that I've more choice there to act. But I really want to know why someone who has already a kind of easy way going through life should have more choice, because then is the choice could also be wished for not showing up as yourself, because if you're already fine with who you are, then you will show up as who you are, and then the choice could also be used to try to be more than or different than you really are. So
Well,
what's the
the
meaning of the
choice,
choice you want?
so the choice can be, um, so certain situations require certain things. They do. Certain situations require you sometimes to put up a wall as a choice, to not allow. So, for instance, if I meet somebody who is narcissistic and who's trying to pull on my energy, it's a very, very beautiful choice
Yeah,
to put up a wall and say no over my dead body, you're coming here, and keep my heart open to myself, but not allow them to suck my energy out
yeah,
without losing my self-love, without even losing my ability to love them and their soul, but to not be pulled into the demand. Now that's choice. If you're always vulnerable, then you might not have a choice to defend yourself
yeah.
or to stand up or to get angry. I was
Especially
talking,
when you're someone who's really easily fawning,
exactly.
then it's really good to have the choice not to. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's
It's
very,
very
very,
wise to have a
very
choice
clear. Yeah,
to and then most people think, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna cut my empathy arm off and tone it down a little bit. That's that's not gonna be a solution. You need to have the choice to where you open that valve and where you close it, um, from a place of not closing it for yourself, just closing it in that situation. And that's a very different level of choice. That means that you don't abandon who you are anymore. Because in the masks that take us over, we abandon our true self and we allow the masks to come instead. And
mm.
then we say, yeah, but I'm doing that to protect myself. But actually, you're not protecting yourself, you're abandoning yourself. And if our best self defense is self abandonment, we're extremely vulnerable. Because if our self defense is self abandonment, then we get very lost and very rigid in our rituals and very rigid in, I can cope with this situation, but I choose to never be in a different situation. But guess what? We can't choose all of our life. Yeah, most of it, of course, and we can get out of certain relationships, and of course, we have a little bit more choice than we think, but none of us chose the war in Gaza or in Ukraine, and none of us chose the government that we have right now, and none of us chose certain rules. And well, maybe some of us did actually, because the government isn't there without choosing, right? But there was a lot of things that we didn't choose, and yet they're here. My mom did not choose to break her hip, and yet she did. My son did not choose to wreck the car last week, and yet it happened. So we don't choose all of it, but we need to learn to navigate all that choice. And that means that we need to allow ourselves to choose how we can stay with ourselves and not abandon ourselves from a place of, I can't allow myself to feel these emotions because I can't know how to deal with them. Um,
So coming back to where we started, you said it's appearing that the neighbors of your parents already know your parents better than you thought they would know them, because they already saw what kind of people they are and that they're needing some attention or care from
yes.
the neighborhood. Um, so how would you say then? I don't think that this is normally for every couple or person that it will be held in this neighborhood, it's little
I,
society.
well, maybe they live in an exceptional neighborhood. And on the other hand, I am deeply aware that most people's support network is a lot bigger than they can possibly see for themselves. So, after having coached over 800 people, maybe by now over 1,000, I stopped counting at COVID. So, I've learned that all of those people told me, I don't do well in groups. I'm not a group kind of person. Um, I'd rather work one on one with you and fix my shit, and then I will be able to deal with people. Every single one of my clients has said something like that. And it's not true because all of them feel more supported once they've heard other people's stories. And all of them have been willing, except one who has autism. So, and all of the rest wants to hear the other people's stories, wants to be able, is often even helped on a very unexpected, well, unexpected for them, level by being able to hold space for somebody else and to help somebody else. That is often way more touching for people than to be able to be held even. So all of this has to do with, can I see how willing people are to see me in my most vulnerable place? How willing am I to see how held I am instead of trying to hold myself? Now, what we see in society is a lot of, if you're a victim, we'll hold you. We hardly see that people are willing and able to hold you in your strength, to be there for you when things are going well. We often think that, and in our society that's very true, and I think in a lot of societies, if there's drama, everyone will help you. But if you're successful, it's hard, because if you're successful, you have to do it all alone, which is very much down to high school, where you had to do everything on your own, where you're only supported if you're taking responsibility, and if you're actually doing well, nobody's there for you. If you're doing bad, so for instance, when our kids, just our own kids, right? When they were having problems, there was a team around them. But when they were doing fine, nobody looked. And I think that is one of the symptoms that we have in the society, right? If somebody's doing fine, we tear them down. If somebody's doing exceptionally well, we have a gossip magazine culture around that, right? If somebody has huge success, we really rip their face off, right? And that's not necessarily in everybody's surrounding, but it is the culture that we're growing up in. We grow up in a culture of, yeah, but the poor people are so poor. Oh, we really need to help them. But what a lot of us who are doing well and not necessarily in deep shit or in extreme fortune are unaware of is that people are actually wanting to keep an eye out for you. They want to help all of us feel better when we can serve other people. And all of us do better when we matter to somebody and when we mean something for somebody. All of us do better when it comes to that. That doesn't mean that you need to lean on other people and they will carry you through life. That's a different thing. That's what we want to get rid of. But if you have problems or emotions or things you don't know how to deal with, people want to be there for you. Authentic living really comes down to, are you willing to share of yourself and not just share content so that you can ask money for it, or share solving other people's problems, or share of your fortune, but can you share your stories? Can you share who you are inside? Can you share your energy? Can you share by giving a shit? Can you share by putting an arm around somebody who you might not know and ask them if they're okay? It's a very different level of sharing, and I think we have not been trained to see how much of that sharing is actually available for us. I was listening to a book. Who was the author? I forgot. It's probably Brian McLaren. And he said, and it really touched something deep in me because it's, to me, it's exceptionally true. He said, New York is often, how do you say it, marketed as a cold, lonely city where it's harsh to get round because people are all sucked into their own little world. I have the same experience in the west of the Netherlands. People don't have a lot of space and they're all sucked into their own little tube. Probably there's some truth to it. But, and he said, the New York he knows is a New York of deep connection and of conversations that go deep in 3 minutes. That says more about him than about New York. And it was beautiful because when I was listening to that book, I realized I have the same experience. I don't like the west of the Netherlands because nobody has space and there's a lot of stress and a lot of rat race going on. But honestly, that's what I see when I walk on the streets, and that made me feel very unhinged. But looking back at it, and I left 20 years ago, of course, but looking back at my years there, I actually did have deep connections and deep conversations, and people actually still know me there. And there is a deep level of connection that I am able to make that I was also able to make in my early 20s when I didn't notice my ability of making that. And that brings me back to, people see your true self even if you can't see it. I have always had the ability to connect deeply, but I wasn't aware of it. Now, that has everything to do with my childhood. The more I'm becoming aware of that ability, the more I can trust it. Doesn't mean I didn't have it.
Yeah, so um, as I know your parents, especially your father, that is easy in opening up in conversations and show his enthusiasm about things, his curiosity. Um, that might be why people know him. And I think it's true that even when you're not such a open person and not share that much, that people will know you in a way because people are very good in reading other people's, even when they not tell their deepest stories
Exactly.
or share their real emotions or feelings. But it makes it easier when people do.
It
So
does. It does.
because there's always a possibility that all misinter inter, inter
Interpret.
misinterpret the what they see in other people or feel
Yes.
or
Yes.
so. I think that that's really, if you talk about choice, so people want to have more choice, and that would be the most beautiful choice I would have or already have gained in the last 15 years, 20 years, that I can open up and I can share what's going around in me
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
and not waiting for the other for permission to open up because the other didn't open up yet. So
Yeah.
like I did before, waiting
Yeah.
for permission that I could speak, express myself.
Yeah. And what you say
And
there's
so that's the
yeah.
choice that is really made my life really so much more beautiful and interesting
Yeah.
by sharing what's there or asking what's going on in the other person. And then there's always a nice conversation. There's always a level of intimacy that
Yeah.
makes it really nice. So it's only already for this um, deepening that it's already nice to have the choice to um, you're not led anymore by shame or guilt or the kind of feelings that
Yeah.
put me down, but
Yeah.
really it's not gone. It's still there, but it's not an barrier anymore to open up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that the way you said it is beautiful. And what you just said there, right? Me not opening up, waiting for the other person to go first. And that is in our society on so many levels, right? I see so many people posting on LinkedIn saying, judging other people for judging other people. So then there is a whole post around, these people are judging and I don't agree with their judging and they need to stop judging. And the whole post is judging them. And it's we're so waiting, and I'm not judging that either. It's just it's testimony to our big desire to be seen and our big desire to find a space where maybe somebody would be able to see us, but where we don't allow ourselves to just share the other side of sharing, not judging, of light, of saying, wow, can I see how deeply the other person might need help? But it's impossible to see how deeply the other person might need help if you need help. So,
I'm thinking about this judging, because it's a very general thing we do in society, judge. And could it be that because we really want to be a nice, we want to start a nice conversation, so we try to find some things we could share, and so we dig a little in ourselves. What could we share that we can open up? But I recognize when there's a lot of self judgment in yourself,
yeah,
then finding how can I open up is very soon the self judgment, and you project it on somebody else or something else.
absolutely.
Then
Yes.
so showing up is automatically judging because then there's a subject, then there's something to
Yes.
share.
Yeah, and never forget that we can only see the world through our brain filters. We can't see an intention. We can see, we can't even see what the other person is really meaning. We can only see what our brain filter allows us to see, which is always going through all of our past trauma before it comes up with a conclusion. And then we think that's the truth,
Yeah.
but it's never that simple.
So I think a lot of filters in our society are about self judgment and
Yes.
automatically come to judge. everyone, every each thing in society.
But even that's not that simple because, for instance, until I was seven, well, and after, but until I was seven, certain brain filters are being built, right? And I was severely judged. So that means that my entire system says, well, that's just how I see the world. It's not as simple as stop doing that. Yeah, true, stop doing that. But my system hasn't learned, well, by now it has, but it hadn't learned to do anything else. So then, yeah, we can stop judging, but we have to also look at what else to do now. And that's not as simple as shouting a few mantras in in the mirror, saying other words, because yeah, partly that's true, but also the brain center of love wasn't built. So the only center that was built in my brain was judging, and the center of deep love and compassion and support had not been built in me. So before I could stop judging, I needed to rebuild these centers that should have been built before seven. And that's a very different thing. So we can I was talking this morning with a person who said, "Yeah, I hold a pillow with that little kid so that I can hold it." And that's beautiful. But it's not enough because that little kid can't find a new solution. So, yeah, it needs comfort, it needs relaxation, it needs to know that we're still here for it, but it also needed to learn how to accept love. And my 50-year-old self cannot teach my internal child. I need other grown ups to do that. That's why when we teach trauma therapy, we don't just do EMDR and hypnotherapy and stuff like that. We really rewire that nervous system to a degree of it being able to hold the light of God, because that's what we're here to do. That is what other people see shining through in us. But can we allow ourselves to see it? And that's a very profound question. I'm thinking because I need to go downstairs in a moment. I'm thinking, how can we wrap this up? There's so many things that we talked about today that deserve an entire episode on their own. Hmm. And I think the
So
biggest, yeah, go ahead.
next episode about trauma and self judgment,
Yes, yes.
maybe.
So, trauma and self judgment, that is a big thing. Okay, guys, next episode, trauma and self judgment, and how that can be a tool to build a better container for yourself. Yes. Uh, Thank you so much, Echo. Guys, we have to go because my mom needs me. Um, so this episode is a little bit shorter than usual. It is what it is. 10 minutes short. We'll make it up next time. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you next time about trauma and self judgment. Take care of yourself and know that you are loved.
Bye.